Hello out there, my ghouls and goblins. Taylor here, your casual crypt keeper, and I have got something for you today. Hope you brought yourself a bottle of water and a nice sun hat, because today we are going digging. We'll be out in the sun all day, uncovering some of the strangest and most unsettling archaeological dig sites to confound all manner of professional researcher. Let's see what we can dig up with the top 5 concerning archaeological discoveries government fears. You let me know which one of these has you heebling and jeebling. Let's dive on in. Number 5, tiny mummy alien. In 2003, researchers in Chile uncovered something bizarre that rocked the archaeological world. It was a mummified skeleton. That's pretty normal. Except this one didn't look even remotely like any other skeleton or mummy any archaeologist had ever seen before. This mummy was tiny, yet elongated, deformed in a way that almost made it look like the dried carcass of a fish more than anything that could have been human. The mummy was barely even 6 inches, and while it had some traits that made it look human, everything about it was wrapped in mystery. Making matters more puzzling was the sight of its uncovering inside an abandoned ghost town in Chile, untouched by humans for years, found wrapped in a white cloth and a pink ribbon. The entity was dubbed Ada, and was fascinating professionals and armchair alien enthusiasts who wondered if possibly the mummy could have been evidence of extraterrestrial life, making it the first alien mummy ever found. And there was even a documentary featuring her body suggesting her as an alien. Researchers wanted to DNA test Ada to discover just what her origins could have been, terrestrial or not. I mean, you gotta know, right? Eventually the DNA analysis would reveal the truth. An extract from Ada's bone marrow was used to conduct a study and was determined to be a human female. Now at first scientists were unsure about this because 8% of the DNA didn't match with human DNA, although later they determined this was because of a degradation in the sample. A later test would come in at 98%. And they discovered that the remains had a rare bone aging disorder that made the bones seem significantly older than the person they had belonged to. Bonitis, I think they called it. They determined as well that Ada's body contained evidence of several gene mutations to an extreme degree. I think you could probably guess that by looking at it. One researcher said, to our knowledge, no one has ever explained all of these symptoms in a patient before, and the changes in DNA or mutations reflect this. So yeah, Ada might not have been an alien, but the information in her DNA was definitely alien and unusual to the staff, who do hope that they can use what they've learned to put forward to help future patients. And if you're looking for more weird things found in the ground, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. We've got just about everything freaky that could be found under the sun and above it. We got cryptids, conspiracies, true crime, aliens, fake crime, you name it, we got it. So click on through, hit the bell, subscribe, and don't miss a thing. But do it after this video, okay? We got way more weird archaeological sites coming up for you. Number 4, the mass execution. Now I imagine getting executed is probably pretty scary. It might be nice to have a bit of company to do it with. Maybe 80 of my closest friends would make it all go down just a little bit easier. A shocking discovery in 2016 found at least 80 partially complete skeletons unearthed at an ancient cemetery in the Fauron Delta necropolis in Greece. Wow, that's a mouthful. Fauron Delta necropolis. I'm pretty sure that's where like you'd fight a boss. Now 80 skeletons all in one place? That's spooky. But it's the fact that all of these bodies were bound by iron shackles that is bone chilling. Some are laid neatly in a row, others have their jaws permanently hung open in terror, you know, fun stuff. Archaeologists have a pretty solid theory that this was an ancient Greek mass execution. Now the head of the excavation at the site said they'd all been executed in the same manner, but buried with respect. Well, that's good. As long as you get shoved in the dirt with respect alongside 79 other people, no harm done, truly. They were all tied at the hands with handcuffs, and most of them were very, very young and in a good state of health when executed. Now they suspect they were executed, that much is evident, but eluding researchers is why they were executed. The orderly way in which they were buried and dealt with suggests that while they may have been a nuisance to someone, they were important enough to be treated with just a little bit of respect. Isn't that nice? One theory, and before we get into this, let me just say I love this theory, is that these were supporters of an Olympic champion named Cylon, who staged a coup against Athens with the help of his father-in-law, the tyrant of Megara. Nothing to do with the hottie from Hercules and Hades. Now, while Cylon managed to elude any harm that would come to him, it's possible that the Athenians, who had pledged their support to him, had to be punished, which is kind of all kinds of wild to me. Imagine if someone took your opinions about sports so seriously you ended up in a mass grave over it. We may never know why exactly these Athenians were shackled and buried, but we can speculate our best, and that's always a lot of fun, isn't it? We love wild speculation around Top 5 Scary. That's basically the brand. Number 3, the Dracula Burials. Are you afraid of vampires? I'm gonna take a guess that the answer is most likely no. What with vampires mostly being fictional, they aren't a huge problem in today's society, and if they are out there, they've learned to mingle among us and they're not bothering anybody like Nicolas Cage and Keanu Reeves. Are they vampires? I don't know for sure, but why don't they age? Maybe it's because we've taken care of the vampire problem that they don't really keep coming up. Take a look at this. A recent discovery in Poland had researchers shocked when they discovered a grave site that seemed like it was host to a vampire mass burial. Bodies were found buried with sickles placed around their necks or rocks lodged down their jaws in order to keep them in place should a possible reanimation occur. That just seems like good sense, to be honest. Good built-in insurance so they're not gonna come back. Now we think of Dracula as the king of the vampires, but the truth is stories of creatures of the night long predate the infamous Count, with stories appearing across Eastern Europe since the 11th century, and newspaper accounts of the revenant creatures since the 17th century. Researchers analyzed fragments from the Drowsko cemetery where this vampire masquerade was uncovered, learning some interesting tidbits. The vampires' DNA all suggested that they were locals and that their bodies had been laid to rest peacefully, otherwise that there was no signs of a violent struggle or an altercation of any kind. This led researchers to suspect that these people had fallen ill to cholera and their symptoms had locals convinced that they might have been creatures of the night. Or they could possibly have been real vampires. I don't know if there's like a scientific test to determine vampirism. I don't know if you study that from the bones or anything. I think maybe you just hold a mirror up and if you can't see them back, they're vampires. And I think that's the scientific process. Number 2, the Skull Lake. In 2009, archaeologists were excavating the bottom of a prehistoric lakebed in Motala, Sweden, when they stumbled upon the foundations of a mysterious stone structure sealed at the bottom of the lake. Now, if a little siren is going off in the back of your head, you're not alone. I feel like you and I have the knowledge to not open a mysterious structure sealed at the bottom of a lake, but we can't all be as wise and as handsome as the Top 5 Scary audience. Well, the researchers did some digging and uncovered something very bizarre inside the mysterious stone structure, namely animal bones, stone tools, and the 8,000-year-old skulls of 10 people, ranging in ages from very young to very old, and then found an 11th skull buried within the ancient mud at the bottom, and get this, like the world's worst Kinder Egg, they found fragments of another skull lodged inside the cranium of the 11th skull. It's a surprise for everybody. That would probably be already horrifying enough to earn itself a place on this list, but I buried the lead here and neglected to mention that several of the bodies had stakes driven through them and had shown signs that they were burnt. 2 of the skulls were found with stakes still stuck inside them, and 1 stake had been completely melded with the cranium. And I'm not even done yet. What's most concerning is that the archaeologists who discovered the terrible bone nesting doll don't even really know what they found. They're kind of shrugging just like you and I are now. One theory is that it was a ritual site, perhaps where some dark rituals would have taken place. The pointed end of the stake was probably stuck in the ground, and after the ritual was complete, the rest of the bones were just tossed under the shallow lake. Now that doesn't really explain the conditions of things unless it was a particularly violent ritual. Parts of a skull don't tend to end up in someone else's skull unless something seriously rowdy is going on. Another possibility is that these were the remains of enemies, and the staked skulls were brought back by warriors as trophies. Now this explanation is possible, but no records have ever shown that the Predator lived in Sweden, and I think the Predator is more of a skull hunting guy than any humans. Anyway, we may never know the truth behind this one, and I'm gonna be honest, that might be for everybody's best. I want to sleep tonight. And number 1, the HMS Franklin. Have you ever dreamed perhaps of sailing the world, going all master and commander, discovering new lands with your comrades in arms under the mizzenmast? I wanted to be a naval explorer for years, unconcerned of the dangers of the sea. Well, it turns out that the life aquatic is significantly more dangerous than the movies make it out to be, and oftentimes you never make it home. In 1845, Sir John Franklin led 2 great ships, the HMS Erebus and the unfortunately named HMS Terror, on a voyage to chart the Arctic. Franklin was a seasoned sailor, and he'd already been around the Arctic 2 times already, and thought he knew his way around an iceberg. Well, it's the Arctic, and things happen. Can't plan for it. That departure in 1845 would be the last time anyone ever saw any of those 2 ships for the better part of 170 years. The Erebus and the Terror both became trapped in ice, and an unreasonably cold summer meant that they were trapped there much longer than anyone could have expected. In a desperate attempt to flee the situation, the crews of both ships evacuated and made a dreadful journey some 1,000 miles to the nearest trading port on the Hudson Bay. Now, you don't need to be a historian. You tell me how you think this turned out. Well, you can probably guess, since they're listed as #1 on a video about scary archaeological finds, the walk home didn't go super great. The bodies were eventually discovered, preserved in terrifying detail. Captain America, they ain't. Now, the bodies were buried in permafrost, meaning they were preserved kind of like a mummy, but colder and way scarier. They look like latex Halloween masks, but they're real people. And where things get truly terrifying was wound patterns on bones nearby to the bodies that suggested when the crew got hungry, they started looking inwards for food, for long pork. If you are what you eat, then these people are humans. If the implication is not coming across just yet, I don't know if I can be any more subtle about it. Bones had been found cracked, the marrow empty, and knife marks on the bones suggested cuts like a butcher would have. The crew had run out of supplies and began eating their own, desperate to make it back, but never did. The lesson to be learned here? You can never pack enough trail mix. Always bring a second bag of that stuff. Bring some jerky before you have to start treating the cabin boys as food. Well, that's about all she wrote for this one, my ghouls and goblins. Glad we ended there. I don't know if my stomach could take any more. As always, thanks for watching. Creep on, creeping on, and I'll see you in the next one, provided I don't get frozen nowhere. Take it easy.